It just dawned on me that we are already in week 9 of the college football season. And week 8 was quite eventful. So much to unpack. Ohio State beat Penn State in the game of the week. Oklahoma survived a scare against UCF. Texas survived a scare against Houston. Alabama dominated Tennessee behind a dominant second half performance by the Crimson Tide. Florida State dominated Duke after falling behind early. Number 5 Washington survived a scare against 1-5 Arizona State. And 1-5 Virginia went on the road and took down number 10 North Carolina. Wisconsin had a come from behind win against Illinois. Utah upset USC with a game-winning field goal as time expired. And I'm probably missing some stuff. Week 8 was that eventful. What does week 9 have in store for us? The 7 games on the docket this week: Ohio State and Wisconsin, Georgia and Florida, Colorado and UCLA, Oklahoma and Kansas, Tennessee and Kentucky, Duke and Louisville, and we wrap things up with the game of the week, Oregon and Utah. Without further ado, let's get to the week 9 college football predictions. Our first matchup on the docket this week, number 3 Ohio State goes on the road to Camp Randall Stadium to take on Wisconsin. And this game does feel pretty simple. I feel like Ohio State it's pretty obvious Ohio State's a much stronger team than Wisconsin, but there are no guarantees in college football. And I wrote down the current line for this game: Ohio State at -14.5. Now, that kind of feels like too many points, even though I talked about a couple weeks ago how Wisconsin's defense is not as good as we're used to seeing it over the years. However, I do think Wisconsin does have what it takes to make this a ball game. Wisconsin, they may be coming off of an emotional come-from-behind win against Illinois last week. But Ohio State, they are also coming off of an emotional game as well against Penn State. A very physical defensive game. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a career game, 11 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown. I am picking Ohio State to win this game, obviously, because they're the much better team. But as we wind down in the college football season, I have a strong feeling we're going to see a lot of upsets take place. And I'll bring it up next week as we get into November about how teams, they just crack under the pressure. And we've seen it quite a few times in recent memory. But do I think Ohio State, do they crack under the pressure this week? No, I do not. I think Ohio State wins this game, but I do have a feeling that Wisconsin, they may be actually able to cover in this one. I do think they can keep it within 2 scores. I think Braylon Allen has what it takes to get the Badgers some energy in the game. And if you look at early in the game against Penn State last week, Ohio State's defense, they gave up a couple big plays early, but Penn State just couldn't capitalize the way that they were supposed to and needed to win that game. I think Wisconsin can capitalize on big plays they get. They have a chance of pulling off the upset, but I just can't see it. But I think the Badgers may cover in this one. Number 1, Georgia and Florida. This is a rivalry game, and anything can happen. I do understand that anything can happen in any college football game, but in a rivalry game, we tend to see a lot of college football's most iconic moments take place. Georgia is going to be without tight end Brock Bowers for the time being. And Brock Bowers has been a focal point in Georgia's offense, not only this season, but in the past couple of seasons. And he leads the team with 41 catches, 567 yards on the season, along with 4 touchdowns. And Brock Bowers was starting to get the hot hand in Georgia's offense before he left the Vanderbilt game early with an injury. But I still think Georgia has the playmakers to be a dominant factor. However, this season so far from Georgia, they do not look as dominant as I thought we were going to see them be this season. They had a sloppy game against South Carolina. They had a sloppy game against Auburn. But I did talk about when they played Kentucky, they would dominate that game because the Auburn game was a wake-up call for them. And I really do see Georgia dominating Florida in this game in a 41-10 type of fashion. But Florida, they may have some intangibles that could work in their favor. But unfortunately, what Florida is good at, Georgia is just as good, if not way better. Florida is 10th in third down defense. Georgia, they lead the country in third down defense. Georgia is also second in third down conversion percentage. Georgia's 7th in scoring offense. And that's another big reason why I do think Georgia will eventually run away with this game. But I think Florida could keep them in it for maybe the first half. But I do think the further along we get into the game, I think the better Georgia will be. Florida is 7th in first down offense. So winning on early downs on first down will be a huge factor for Florida if they want to make this a game. They're 4th in time of possession are the Gators, but Georgia is 6th in time of possession. And we saw Florida give up a 280-plus yard day to Ray Davis against Kentucky a few weeks ago. And I do think Georgia is going to have success in the running game with Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton. And I really don't know what else to say about this game. I do think Georgia is going to dominate in this game. I just don't know any other way to put it. Colorado and number 23 UCLA. And I am intrigued to see how the Buffaloes start this game, as they are coming off of a bye week. Before that, they surrendered a 29-0 halftime lead against Stanford. Colorado currently sits in last in total defense. Shedeur Sanders is 4th in the NCAA in passing yards with 2,420. I do anticipate that Travis Hunter will have himself a really good game, as UCLA's defense, maybe 11th total defense, but I anticipate Colorado going to have to throw the ball constantly in this game, as UCLA has the best run defense in the FBS. Now, the one thing that is really not in UCLA's favor right now is the uncertainty of the starting quarterback, as Chip Kelly is not naming a starting quarterback for this matchup. But I don't think it matters, though. I just think that Colorado's defense is completely weak. I think it doesn't matter who's a quarterback. I think UCLA, they do win this convincingly. And I think Carson Steele's in for a big game as well, as I think this game is going to be a lot like Colorado and TCU, where UCLA is going to run the ball really well like TCU did, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. So I do think that UCLA, they do win this game convincingly. And I think their defense, I think they may have some trouble early on, but I think as the game settles in, I think the better the Bruins will be. Up next, number 6, Oklahoma and Kansas. Oklahoma is coming off of a scare against UCF last week, winning by a score of 31-29. Their defense rose to the occasion and stopped a UCF game-tying 2-point conversion at the end of regulation. I do think for this game, it's in Kansas's best interest to run the football, as Oklahoma gave up 149 rushing yards to UCF last week. Quarterback Jalen Daniels is doubtful for this game with a back injury, so it looks like once again Jason Bean will be the starting quarterback for the Jayhawks on Saturday, and he has thrown 913 passing yards 9 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions on the season. I do think Oklahoma wins this game, but I do think with Bedlam being next week, and that is a rivalry game for them, I think they could be looking ahead to that a little bit. And I do think they may start off slow, but I still think they will get the win. I think Oklahoma should win by at least double digits, but you never know in college football. If they play the way like they did last week in CCF, I do think they could be in a bit of trouble. If Jalen Daniels was in the game for the Jayhawks, I would say Kansas has a chance of pulling out the upset, but I just can't see it with Jason Bean. Number 21, Tennessee and Kentucky. And this is a battle of two teams that you could arguably say are feeling pretty depleted right now. Despite coming off of their bye week, Kentucky, they've lost 2 in a row after the confidence booster against Florida. They lost 51-13 at home against Georgia the following week. And then heading into their bye week, they lost 38-17, I believe it was. 38-21 against Missouri at home. And Tennessee's coming off of a disappointing second half on the road against Alabama, where they had a 20-7 lead at halftime, but Alabama outscored Tennessee 27-0 in the second half. So these are two teams that maybe aren't feeling pretty confident coming into this game. But whoever wins this game, it's going to be a confidence booster for the home stretch of the season. And I'm going to pick Tennessee in this game, mainly because I've at least been impressed with Tennessee in the last couple of weeks compared to Kentucky. As Tennessee was coming off a physical game against Texas A&M before going on the road to Alabama, and they got off to a good start, but they just couldn't finish. Jace McClellan had 115 rushing yards for the Crimson Tide last week against the Volunteers defense. For Kentucky to win this game, Ray Davis is going to have a big game for the Wildcats. But this was a game I was undecided on for the longest time, but I am settling in on Tennessee. I think they bounced back after the second half last week in a battle of teams that I don't feel are as confident coming into this matchup as they should be. Number 20, Duke, and number 18, Louisville. For Duke, quarterback Riley Leonard, his status is unknown for this game. He did give it a go in the Florida State game, but he left that game early with an injury. And Duke was holding their own in that game against Florida State for a while, but then Florida State, they became more dominant as the game went along. It felt like a reminder of the LSU-Florida State game from the opening weekend, where LSU was holding their own, but then Florida State got better as the game went along. And basically what I summed up for Duke football this season is, despite Duke having one of the better defenses in college football, despite having the experience on their defense returning from last season, Mike Elko has done a good job at building Duke into a really good football program. Without Riley Leonard, it feels like Duke is going nowhere. And if he can't play in this road game against Louisville, I think Louisville runs away with this game pretty handily. As we've seen Louisville take on some pretty strong competition a couple weeks ago in Notre Dame, but then they did lose to Pitt, which I do think that is what they have going against them in this game. At least the public perception of them is based off of that loss to Pitt. But I think without Riley Leonard, I really don't know who Duke football is, as Riley Leonard was a difference maker in the Clemson game in week 1, and they were so close to taking down Notre Dame with Riley Leonard in the game last week against Florida State, holding their own early on. But he leaves the game. Florida State, they go on a run. So I'm picking Louisville in this game, despite Duke probably being the better defense in this game. I just like the running game for Louisville in this matchup. And I think Louisville, they do get the win this matchup if Riley Leonard doesn't play. Definitely becomes a runaway, I feel like. But if he does play, I think Duke will be able to stay in it from start to finish. But I think Louisville wins in the end if Riley Leonard indeed plays. But who knows if he's playing or not at this point in the week. There's still a long way to go until the game on Saturday. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think either way, I think Louisville wins this game. And finally, our game of the week. Number 8, Oregon. Number 13, Utah. Oregon is first in total offense, second scoring offense, only behind LSU. And they've only allowed 4 sacks all season long. The main story for Utah has been their defense. They are 5th in run defense, 14th in total defense. And I will say, I'm going to add in that both teams have 25 sacks on the season so far. And that is right up there with the most in college football. So these two teams, they get to the quarterback well. Also, I anticipate Utah is going to use their offense as their best defense in this matchup as they lead the country in time of possession. As they're going to try to dictate the pace of this game, knowing that their offense is not the offense they were hoping for coming into the season, as both Cameron Rising and Brant Kuithe were officially ruled out for the season last week. And also their star linebacker, Lander Barton, is out for the season. So that is big news going into a game like this in what is essentially an elimination game in the college football playoff. As this is essentially the only game of the week that you would consider having true college football playoff implications. And I get that really every game has college football implications, but this is the game of the week for a reason. Now, the narrative for Bo Nix in his entire career has been he's not good on the road. And I brought it up when they were playing Washington in the game of the week a couple weeks ago. And they would have won that game. It was coaching decisions that cost Oregon that game, as they left quite a few points on that board. 3 points for the half, 3 points early on the second half, and they go for it on 4th down in no man's land. They don't get it, and then Michael Penix Jr. throws the game-winning touchdown pass to Rome Odunze 2 plays later. And then they do have a chance to force overtime, but their kicker misses the field goal. So Oregon could be in a much better spot than they are right now with better coaching decisions. And I do think Dan Lanning, he learned from his mistakes in that game, and I respect him for taking full accountability for that loss, as we have seen certain coaches really blame it on their players. So I admire his accountability, his integrity, and despite Bo Nix not being good on the road in his entire career, last week I believe he set the record for most starts in FBS history. And I get you have the CVID 1-9 year to benefit you for that. But the fact is, Bo Nix is one of the most experienced quarterbacks, maybe the most experienced quarterback in college football. So he's seen everything. And his offensive line has done a good job protecting him these last 2 seasons. And I talked about at a few points last year about how the change of scenery was beneficial for Bo Nix. I do think it was the pressure of trying to live up to his dad's legacy at Auburn. I do think that put some pressure on him, and now that he's in the Pac-12 conference where there's not that much pressure than the SEC, I think it's doing wonders for him. And I do think Oregon wins this game, and I think Bucky Irving has a big game as well. With Utah losing their star linebacker Lander Barton for the year, I think it opens up potential running lanes for Bucky Irving. And I think Oregon wins this game as Utah's offense has really not been what they're hoping for it to be. Now, Bryson Barnes has been undefeated this season as Utah's starting quarterback. But I do think Oregon wins this one. I'm going with the more experienced quarterback in this matchup, and that's Bo Nix. And I know it feels kind of plain that I'm picking all the favorites this week, but I just feel like that's the kind of college football Saturday we're in. I do think this college football Saturday, I think it's just kind of, you get those dud weeks every now and then, but next week when we go into November, everything is going to start to get ramped up as it is going to be crunch time, and we're going to be in the home stretch next week. So thank you for tuning in for the Week 9 college football predictions. If there is a matchup I did not predict today that you would like my thoughts on, please leave in the comment section down below and I will respond to you. Also, a brand new top 25 poll will be in the comment section. I will pin it. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. For those of you that don't watch the NFL predictions video, I will see you next week. And for those that do watch the NFL predictions videos, that will be out tomorrow.